Do we have everybody here? It looks like
We're missing Mark Stern.
Mark Stern. I don't see Mark. Well, he's not that important, so we can.
Have a quorum if you want.
Well, okay. So why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order? And some time has passed since our last visit. I'd like to hear what everybody's doing. For me, here in Klamath, we've had a big outbreak, a big surge in the COVID cases. We've been very isolated from it all. We really haven't had many cases, but unfortunately it is now here. I've been asked by the Klamath County Health Department to help them, by volunteering, to help them trace cases and contacts in the city because they're overwhelmed. They don't have enough staff. So
Wow.
It's getting a little sketchy, but we keep moving forward, and my chickens are all doing good, and my wife is fine. My dog is good. So other than that, we're doing well. So I'm getting some feedback. Is that from me or what? Maybe it's stopped now. Okay, well, Davia, tell me about you.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Gosh, I'm thinking, it's been slightly less than a month when we've seen each other last, and I'm not sure anything's changed for me. I've been working on OCRF, working to get ready for today, taking lots of walks with the dog, and had a nice small Thanksgiving with another couple here in town who all have family on the East Coast like I do, and starting to think about these tickets that my husband and I have to go to New York for Christmas, and have a tough decision to make at some point this week, and the tougher job of talking to my mother about whatever decision we make. But to Carl's point, it's a scary time with COVID and trying to figure out what the right move is. But it'll be a tough Christmas to miss.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. We're all confronted with decisions to make on a daily basis now. Sherilyn, how are things in California?
Well, on the COVID front, no better than anywhere else. And we're officially back at a stay-at-home order in our county because I live in the Bay Area. I've been pretty cautious during this whole period, so it doesn't really feel that much different to be officially under stay-at-home order than it did a month ago or a couple weeks ago when we weren't. So for me, not much has been going on. My daughter, my 18-year-old, had a tonsillectomy last week. So that makes 2 surgeries for her during the COVID period, which is crazy to think. I have 6 children. None of them have had any surgeries, and now one of them has 2 in a 7-month period during a pandemic. So go figure.
Well, hope she's doing well.
Yeah, she's doing great.
Good. Jane, we got 2 turtle projects in the top 10.
Yay, turtles! Yeah, that's good. And I heard about 2 projects this week that I said, whoa, those sound like great projects for to submit a project. One is on tracking the trumpeter swans in Oregon that they've been releasing at Summer Lake and at other places. And the other one was censusing all the meadowlarks in the state. And I told both of these people that I heard about these things from that, hey, you should submit a proposal in the next round of funding because those sound like just the kind of projects that we're funding. Other than that, Carl, my chickens are molting, so they're not quite as doing quite as well as yours, but they'll be fine. And let's see, I've got 2 helpers out working on propagating nursery stock, some of which we're going to plant at the state park near here in the spring. So yeah, that's good enough for me.
Great. But I just saw, we don't get meadowlarks in the right around where I live, but there a flock of meadowlarks showed up on a dike,
Wow.
on a barley field right near the house, and they've been there for a month. 15 meadowlarks just there. So it's very weird. I've never seen that, and it just happened. They came about 2 weeks ago, and they're still there. Must be migrating. Let's see. How about Murat?
Well, good morning, everybody. I guess we've just been sort of glad that my in-laws have recovered from COVID, or at least they're home again. My father-in-law spent 13 days in the hospital, and then they don't just let you come home. You have to go to a COVID rehab unit and wait out until you've spent enough time that they don't consider you a danger to the general population. So he was in a COVID unit for another 4 days. And it was scary. We were feeling very helpless on how to take care of either one of them. My mother-in-law was alone in the apartment with COVID and some symptoms, and we had to check in on her regularly. So I'm really glad that they're both home, and they were so happy. They were really like teenagers when they got to see each other. And we've been just taking lots of walks, looking at restoration projects, some that I worked on when I was working for the Forest Service over the last 25 years. And it's amazing. Some of them actually worked really well. So that's been encouraging, because I've also seen lots of my restoration projects not work over time, especially plantings and things where you just plant something and walk away. So we've gotten better at it over time, and White Chiefs was looking really beautiful with water and ice and plants everywhere. So that's about it.
Well, that's gratifying to hear that you're seeing success. That's a lot of projects don't find that, so that's good news. Tim Davis, how's Eastern Oregon?
Eastern Oregon's still here. Yeah, relating to your meadowlark talk, I mean, there's plenty of meadowlarks out here still. I see them all the time. Yeah, still raising kids, and this at-home schooling has its struggles, I'll put it that way. On my front, just plugging away at work, and took a little drive up towards Hell's Canyon. My wife had to get out of the house, she said, so just went for a drive last weekend and went looking for wildlife and just enjoying our time.
Yeah, everybody needs to get out. That's for sure. Mauricio.
Good morning, everyone. It's been really a month. Time seems just so arbitrary nowadays. Just you blink and a week has passed. I think since our last meeting, I've had the pleasure of being thinking a lot about the proposals here at OCRF and other outdoor equity projects that I'm involved in, and this in parallel with this sort of like contrasting realities that we're experiencing now. Now that you're talking about COVID, my family also I have a few members in Florida that are going through it. My mother-in-law and her mom went through it a couple of weeks ago, and to me, it's been really interesting to be forced to think systemically. Like, there is one way in which we see the reality that surrounds us in the immediate vicinity, and how there is so much bigger spheres that you also have to take into consideration that now are directly affecting the way in which we live, that for so long people have been resisting to think and understand that what you are experiencing does not reflect what the world is like, which I think is an unfortunate problem that we'll have to face eventually with much more decisively. And so it also had made me think of how important it is that we take serious STEM education, and that this new generation has the opportunity to understand how science actually works and why it works, and how we owe so much of what we are today because of the effectiveness and the accuracy of science. And so that we stop becoming this society of contrarians rather than trying to understand where the data comes from. So anyways, also like you, Tim, at home schooling with my little ones, but that has been also very gratifying to see how in this year so many things have changed, and They have changed as they're so little in so little time. They change so much. So, you know, great things, not so great things, but ultimately a greater understanding of where we are, which is, I think, a positive outcome anyways.
Thanks for that, Mauricio. I'm going to choose to be optimistic about what you just said. The potential can be for the new generation. Let's hope that's true. Mark Labhart.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So, Carl, I grew up around meadowlarks also. There's not a bird that has a more beautiful song than a meadowlark. And if you've got a bunch of them there, that's probably a chorus. So you should feel pretty good about it. And Sherilyn, you should feel also good about your kids having the surgery, because up here in Oregon, they're, at least where I'm at, a lot of the hospitals are cutting off all surgeries, and you've got to be in dire straits to have surgery now. So it's great that they were able to get their surgeries. Last but not least, I'm just envious, or I'm not envious. When I looked at all those applications and the amount of tough decisions that you had to have to narrow this down to the vital few, I thank you all for your work on this. It's every one of those decisions we should have been funding, or those applications, and it's such a tough decision. I wish we had the money to do this, but I can't thank you all enough for the due diligence that you put into this work. So it looks like some pretty good products that are going to be coming before the commission Friday. So thank you very much.
Mark, I appreciate that sentiment. And in fact, that's a nice segue into the discussion we may have later in the meeting about all those other worthy projects. So thanks for expressing that. I appreciate it. Mark Stern.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see everybody here. We've been outside quite a bit, and again, feel pretty fortunate being able to do that, especially as we compare notes with our daughter who lives in Manhattan, New York, who there's a lot of people to contend with and stays in her apartment mostly. But a couple interesting things. I've been on the Elliott Forest Advisory Committee, which has been a process that's considering transferring the Elliott State Forest from DSL to Oregon State University. And that's been a work in progress for 18 months or more. And yesterday, before the land board voted unanimously 3-0 to endorse going down this pathway. And there's still some things to be worked out, a lot of detail there for sure. But I think it's really encouraging. It'll have a combination of, nobody gets everything they want in these kind of groups. So there will be some tremendous conservation benefits. There'll be recreation and education, and there'll be some harvest going to local mills there. So, but it was pretty neat to see the advisory group, which includes all those interests, come together on it. And then another project, speaking of meadowlarks, I'm involved with a group of people that are working for ODF&W writing species accounts on sensitive species, 68 of them or so. And the one that just by coincidence I drew to start with is Western meadowlarks. So I've been noticing them. Jane saw some out in your backyard on Sovey Island, backyard in the big sense of the word. And I know they've been around Basket Slough, and just great to hear everybody thinking about them. They're a pretty amazing bird. It's also one of those birds that I think they're not very present in the spring in Western Oregon. And whereas a lot of birds are sort of secretive and hard to find, that one is so vocal and obvious that I think if there were more in Western Oregon in the spring and summer, we'd be seeing them and hearing them. So that's my 2 cents for today.
Great. Well, Mark, thanks for the work you've been doing on the outdoor equity piece, and we'll hear from you later on. Kaylin.
Morning, everyone. Kind of similar, hunkering down and cooking food. The fun thing most recently was just we went out and cut down a Christmas tree, which is an annual tradition, and that was a lot of fun. First time doing it with a pup who was pretty well behaved and didn't want to eat the tree, so that's good. Positive news there. And on the work front, feels like things are continuing to crank along. One of the projects I'm working on right now is sort of an end of year state of outdoor recreation use, trying to bring together data from different land managers to actually put some metrics on what we all qualitatively have noticed, which is that more folks got outdoors this year. And so I want to be able to summarize that for the legislature. I'm happy to share it back with this group and others just to provide kind of a snapshot of what recreational use looked like over the year. So that's a fun side project. Other things I'm involved in that are positive news, we have a path forward for Klamath Dam removal. And that was a sort of a nice shot in the arm because I've been working with a bunch of folks, including ODFW, to think about future recreational access along a restored Klamath River. So that news, I think, has been since the last time we talked. And we also have a governor's budget as of last week that included some funding support for increasing equitable access to the outdoors and funding for the Office of Outdoor Recreation to lead that work, which was one of the recommendations from the governor's task force on the outdoors that we talked about a few times here. So that was a good way to start last week, was some positive news and thinking about increased investments next year in the legislative session. So, and I have not seen any meadowlarks, just lots of flickers right outside my window, which are always fun. So.
That's great, Kaylin. That is momentous news about the Klamath River. I don't think people even quite understand what a big deal that is and what that means to this region and basically all of Oregon. It's a major deal. Kaylin, would you mind giving us all an update on sort of where your job is right now, just so we know?
Yeah. So where we are essentially is a group of state agencies, ODFW, Marine Board, Business Oregon, Travel Oregon, Department of Forestry, Department of State Lands, and Oregon State University have been working together over the past couple of months, both to recommend an advisory structure for the Office of Outdoor Recreation going forward that would be kind of a permanent replacement for that governor's task force on the outdoors, and to identify short-term bridge funding to continue staffing the office, the position I'm in, at least through the end of the biennium. And so those agreements are now finalized and written and out for circulation and signature to those various agency directors. So really positive news on that front, that it looks like we're going to be able to pool resources specifically from managers for the kind of collaborative problem-solving work that I've been doing, so continuing to work on COVID policy and into next year on wildfire recovery and efforts like OCRF, et cetera. So while it's not finalized, it at least is really positive news and a pretty unique structure that we're heading towards if we're able to get these signatures down like a good sort of like collaborative format. So
that's really good news, Kaylin. I'm really happy to hear that. That speaks to the work you've done in the past, and the fact you're getting all that support shows the good work you've done. And I'm hearing more and more of how crucial you are felt to be to a lot of entities in that space. It also speaks to the importance of that space, the whole recreation piece, and that segues very nicely into what we're doing. So I'm really happy that we're going to be able to keep you around. Chris Hager.
Hey everybody. Well, last time we met, since then, mostly like Davia, spent Thanksgiving with friends because all my family's been on the East Coast, and so we have a core, basically 2 people that we've been seeing all through COVID. So that was just nice to be able to spend time with them. But other than that, on the work front, things are ramping up for year-end appeals and fundraising. So that's what I'm swamped with right now. And So that's always fun, but looking forward to seeing what we can do here with these projects and moving forward with the next round. So yeah.
Thanks, Chris. So speaking of moving on to the next round, well, I guess we got to do minutes first. Davia, can you put up that motion?
Well,
I think,
obviously,
we also want to do the public.
yeah. That's
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead. Yeah.
most of them I think I can introduce, but I may have to call on a few if I mess up anybody's names. You'll forgive me. So we have Greg Mentz from Representative Helms' office. We have Jason Kessling Harney with SWCD. Jane Jacatis with Walala Resources. Rachel Walsh with Columbia SLU, Sharice Kamal, Defenders of Wildlife. And then we also have, that name just moved down the list. We have a Bill. Can you introduce yourself, Bill?
Yes, thank you. Bill from Sandy River Watershed Council. Have a great meeting.
Thanks. And then we have an H. Lutz, or Lutz. Okay. And then F. O. Young. Down at the bottom of that list, F. O. Young. Can you introduce yourself? Okay. Well, those two are on the line.
Okay.
That's everybody, Carl.
Well, let's go on to the minutes then. Davia, can you put that up, and can we get a motion in a second?
I'll go. I move to approve the November 17th, 2020 meeting minutes with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
And I will second that.
Oh,
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Thumbs up. Looks good. Okay, very nice. Okay, so now we can get into the meat of this thing. We've all been waiting to do this. To start, we're going to have a fundraising update. I think that's going to help us frame our future discussion. So Davia, have you got some numbers for us?
I do have numbers for us. And there's a smidge of bad news here. If you look at the unobligated amount, it's a little lower than the last meeting, and turns out we were double counting one of our restricted gifts at the last meeting. So the total amount that you all have to spend today is $60,685, which is nearly identical to the amount that you had to spend at the July meeting when those decisions were made. So in total, including the funds already obligated, restricted, and spent, we've raised $204,902. But I think the number that's really important for today is the bottom number there is what we have in hand right now.
Okay, so everybody really needs to, in this discussion going forward, you have to really pay attention to that number. Keep that in mind as we're talking. One of the issues with the fundraising, I think it's fair to say that our fundraising has really slowed down with right around the time of the wildfires, when that really caught everybody's attention. And then as COVID worsened, we've really seen a drop in the rate of growth of our funds. We need to keep that in mind moving forward, and that also is important in the discussion we're going to have to come. The other issue that's happening right now is legislative. We have some activity going on, and I think maybe we'll wait to discuss that in the discussion at the end. But there's a lot of moving parts right now. I think, though, the fundraising piece is front and center. And before we go into the projects themselves, is anyone, I think we're going to have a more in-depth discussion later, but does anyone have any comments they want to make regarding the numbers we're showing or the fundraising effort? Does anyone want to make a comment?
I do, Carl. It occurred to me that a lot of people are doing their end of year giving. And this might be another opportunity for at least those of us on the committee to send out a little appeal to people on our contact list, asking them to remember this fund and telling them all the great projects that we've funded and all the great projects we wish we could fund, but we don't have enough money. So that might generate another small round of giving.
Yeah, Jane, I appreciate those sentiments, and you're already the superstar in fundraising for us, so we appreciate what you've done. Anybody else have anything to add to what Jane mentioned?
Well, that might be a good opportunity, Jane, to, if we manage to get it done relatively soon, to invite them to join the webinar tonight. Because I think we're going to be talking specifically about why it would matter to most folks if they're not necessarily aware of this. So I think I will do the same. I'm going to reach out to my contacts and just invite them to join tonight.
Mauricio, thanks for bringing that up. That was in Davia's cheat sheet to me on the agenda, and I skipped right over it. All right, this is the point we wanted to mention, the webinar. I think you folks may be aware of it, but we're having a public webinar this evening. Right now we have, I think they're anticipating about 100 participants, which is good, but we'd like to have more. It's informational, just about who we are and what we're doing. And of course, there'll be some degree of a fundraising plea, but a lot of it is, she has, Davia just posted the Facebook link to this event. So you guys are welcome to join us for it. And hopefully it'll be successful, but thanks for bringing that up, Mauricio. Okay, so now we can move on.
Maret has a word, Carl.
Okay, Maret.
I was just thinking, also, this is maybe a little premature, but if we do end up recruiting money for restricted gifts, I wonder if somebody could start that conversation with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation to see if they could modify the website to make it easier to contribute to a certain project. Because a lot of people tell me, yeah, $10, that's okay, but they might be more excited if they could give $10 for turtles and knew what they were doing. So I think there's lots of examples, GoFundMe sites and stuff where you can sort of see where you're at in terms of where your target is and where you're at. And right now the funding site only allows you to contribute to the general fund. And if you want to do a restricted gift, it takes some finagling.
Marat, that is extremely timely suggestion. And everyone remember what Marat just said in our future conversation about maybe having a list of projects on our website that could be specifically, where funding could be specifically directed to them. Not, okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail, but thank you, Marat. That's very helpful.
Kaylin, did you have something to add?
Yep. So just following up on a sort of sidebar conversation that Carl and I had last week related to outreach and fundraising with outdoor industry sort of corporate partners. I did have an initial short conversation with REI, and the idea of a roundup program to round up your purchase at the register was something that they floated as a good idea. So Carl, whenever it makes sense for you or you and Davia and I to reconnect, that might be part of our pitch. And they have apparently in other states had good success raising money for like causes, but haven't done that yet in Oregon. So I just wanted to let the committee know that I'd had that at least initial outreach there. And I think we should strike while the iron's hot.
Kaylin, that is freaking great news. Oh, that's wonderful. And the timing is very good because I currently have had an e-introduction with someone in that organization, and we're in the process of getting connected. So the timing is perfect. Thank you for that, Kaylin. That's great. So we're going to need that kind of stuff from all of us, getting out there and shaking the bushes, because we've got the need. This is no longer any kind of pie in the sky thinking. We've got real projects on the ground to fund, and it's really important that we keep that forward. We'll have a more in-depth conversation about this later on. The next step here is Davia has to go over some of those restricted gifts that we received. I think we have to, is that correct, Davia? We have to approve these to officially get them funded?
That is correct. So I mentioned at the last meeting that we had some new commitments for restricted gifts, and I got the ball rolling to get the commission to approve those expenditures, but really the first step is for you all to make those recommended expenditures to the commission. So what I'm sharing here, sorry, I'm in the wrong window, but you can see the slide. We actually have 4 restricted gifts for your consideration, and they're summarized here. So we've got the amount the commission approved for these projects in September. Here we've got the restricted donations that have come in and who they are from, and then the new project costs that we'll be asking the commission to approve. So it should be relatively straightforward, and we'll bring this to the commission on Friday if the committee approves these today. Are there any questions or discussion on these?
Davia, do you have a motion printed up?
I have 3 draft motions for us.
Right.
And I think if someone wanted, they could try to make it all one, but simpler to do 3 perhaps.
Is there someone willing to make a motion and just read all 3 of these?
I can at least read the first one.
Okay.
I move to increase the scale of the advisory committee's investment in the Gilcrest Underpass Wildlife Directional Fencing project by an additional $5,000 for a total of $75,000.
Okay, so let's just do these individually then, because I'd like for Moret to read the second one. Can we get a second on that?
I saw Mark's turn.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Thumbs up. All right, great. Moret, would you mind, are you willing to make the motion for the second one?
I move to increase the scale of the advisory committee's investment in the Link Creek project by an additional $1,000 for a total of $8,800.
We get a second on that.
I second.
All in favor? Thumbs up. Wonderful. Okay. Third one. Who's up for
This is Jane. I move to increase the scale of the advisory committee's investment in the feasibility study restoring sea otters to the Oregon coast project by an additional $11,500 for a total of $21,500.
Great. And a second?
I second.
All in favor? Thumbs up. Okay, so we're official. All of those are official. There was a lot of work that went into securing this extra funding. Moret, thank you so much for doing what you did on the Link Creek project. I had the occasion to talk to Derek Staub the other day, and I was quite happy that he's the one I had to call to ask him if he could not get $1,000 from us last time. It was great to be able to tell him we had the other 1,000, which he already knew. But thanks for that.
Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a quick question to Davia about in the $204,000 in total, the money that we just approved, that's not reflected in that number, right?
It is reflected in that number.
It is. Okay.
So we have unrestricted gifts and we have restricted gifts, and 204,000 includes all of that. And so that's money that's come in. We can count it towards the general fund match that we're hoping to get from the legislature, but then we can't. The committee can't spend it because you've already approved a particular.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Are attractive to donors because we're operating under the assumption that it's going to be matched. So not only does it get to fund the project, there's a match in the future, and that's a powerful incentive. And we'll talk also about that a little bit further on. So,
and Carl, just if people are interested, so far of that $204,000, $77,500 is restricted. So that's money that the committee has taken in and put back out onto existing projects.
and I think it happened fairly recently, but that there were two sources for that $11,500 to the Alaka Alliance, and I want to make sure everyone's aware where those came from. One was from Oregon Wild. We really appreciate them. They had a whole campaign specifically for that project. And the other was a gift through the Oregon Ocean Conservation Fund, associated with the Oregon Community Fund. They directed funds through us, and really appreciate their willingness to do that and help that Sea Otter project. Okay, now I think with that we are ready to go on to talk about all these wonderful projects we've been reviewing. To start, we're going to have Mark Stern sort of walk us through the outcome of the Outdoor Equity Subcommittee and what they decided, and present that to you. Mark, are you ready to do that for us?
Sure. And I don't know, Davia, at some point, if you're able to share that memo that was sent out.
Would you like the memo? I just put the table on this slide, but I can pull the memo up if you prefer the whole memo.
This is fine. I think it works well. So just to summarize where we're at, as you know, the Outdoor Equity Subcommittee includes Moret, Mauricio, Carl, myself, and Davia has participated in all the meetings and been an integral part of that as well. And at the end of our last meeting, we hung on and we discussed among ourselves, and we developed a set of 4 criteria that we were using to evaluate the projects here. And what you see on the screen are, let me step back a second. So we use these 4 criteria, and I don't have them right in front of me, but I believe they were, the first one was about impact. And what we were interested in was, what was the impact of the project? Was it going to be lasting? Was it durable? What sort of scale would it land at? So that was one consideration. Second one, just a second, I got it.
Yeah, it's trusted messengers, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Sherilyn. Trusted messengers. And so that was really, was the proponent of the project a trusted messenger for the community that they were trying to reach? And so think about that in terms of was there connectivity between the author of the proposal, or the group that was proposing it, and the audience that they were trying to connect with and work with. And the third one,
Outreach. Number of people to be engaged or involved in the effort.
yeah, thank you. So sort of again, how many people were going to be connected? Was it going to touch a classroom of 4? Was it going to touch a group of 50? And how are they going to manage that, particularly in the time of COVID? I think we were aware that some of the opportunities to have bigger numbers were less, but then some of the projects also just had, were designed in a way that we're going to reach a bigger audience. And then the last one, as you can see, is just sort of, did the project look financially viable? Did they have enough detail about how those funds were going to be used? So those were the 4 variables that we read through. I believe there were 13 projects that we were asked to review. Those were all ones that rated 5.5 or 6 on the equity variable that we had rated all the projects on. And so with that in mind, we did that. We reconvened again. And Davi, if we can go back to that list of the 13 proposals that came out, we identified 7 proposals that were in a sort of a priority tier, as you can see there. And then we ranked them as follows, 1 through 7. And I think our feeling was they were all good projects. So we did put those first 3 at the top, but we felt like all 7 were interesting, relevant, and pertinent, and applicable and qualified under the criteria that we had brought forward as part of the OCRF funding. I guess I'd pause for a moment and ask if Moret or Mauricio, Carl, or Davia have anything they'd want to add at this point.
Sure, I'll chime in. I think one of the things we looked at hard was quite a few proposals were looking at planning, not doing. And so there was a lot of sort of researching different communities, and we really wondered how safe some of those communities would feel being researched right now. You know, just didn't feel like that was maybe the best. I'm sure it's important, but maybe right now this isn't a good time for that. We really wanted to see boots on the ground kind of action happening.
Yeah, and I think Mauricio, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to also share that as we talked about it, we were really looking for projects that were, you know, in terms of the trusted messenger, authored, if you will, in partnership or by the audience that they were serving. So in this case, we were particularly attuned to different organizations and entities that were sort of underserved or underrepresented communities that were putting forth a proposal on their own, because we felt like that was a direct connection and sort of was, if we had to prioritize and make a choice, that was a way to try and increase capacity and support those efforts. So we tended to look closely for that type of connection in the projects that we put forward.
I agree, and I think I'm very pleased with the results, mostly because similarly to what Moret has put forth, I think there is very demonstrable correlation between, for instance, mass distribution of information or availability of tools versus engagement. So I much rather see, like you say, Moret, boots on the ground, folks that are actually taking these communities out, connecting with nature, and then establish those relationships, allowing them to find a place in the natural world, and then build a network of trust organically, rather than, say, put videos on Facebook imagining that views or click-throughs really do have any relevance in terms of the impact that they may have on our overall objectives. So.
And I guess another point, as we looked at it, we also tried to look at outdoor equity, looking at both sort of ethnicity and racial considerations and cultural considerations, but also cultural in the sense of urban-rural divide. So we're also aware that sometimes opportunities to participate in these things in some of Oregon's rural communities that have less resources was important to consider as well. So we tried to look at it from a whole variety of different lenses on what underserved was and where there was need as we rolled it up here. And so what you can see is, as you all recall, we as a committee had originally agreed to allocate $20,000 in this grant cycle to outdoor equity recommendations or to projects. And we ranked these 3 at the top here. Obviously that totals 25,000, and part of what we wanted to bring back to the group today was thinking about how we might or might not be able to fund those at that level. We did have some discussion about asking different groups to, if they could go forward with their project with a lesser amount of money. But we collectively agreed that it didn't feel right to go back to groups that had proposed a project and then say, well, okay, well, we'll fund you, but we'll only give you X amount as opposed to the full amount. And that may jeopardize the viability of the project. And it seemed we just needed to take the proposals at face value for what they asked for and decide which ones we could fund and not get involved in trying to make the pieces fit our budget more specifically. So that's where we landed. I guess, Carl, I'd put it back to you to see where you want to go with it from here.
Yeah, so Mark explained that very well. We came up with this top 3 for 25,000. We had allocated 20, but we had said at the time that that was a minimum and that we would like to fund more. So it occurred to us that to ask the committee if we could go to 25. Now, I will say that was with the thought that we had 65 to 70,000 and not 60,000. That's a new number for us. So I think it rather than make a decision on that, I think we can sit on that to a little bit later in the meeting as to whether we're going to allocate that $5,000 to make all of these projects whole. And this is the time to bring up, as I've been alluding to, a little different strategy about moving forward from here. And before we get into the other projects, I'm going to just put out a suggestion for us to consider. As has been stated multiple times in this meeting, we have some really great projects. Pretty much everything that's on this list, all 7, all 22 of the other projects are good projects. One of the ways to move forward from here is, rather than having yet another solicitation for projects when we can't even fund the good ones that we have, is to take a look at these projects that we're not funding, say they're worthy. We do intend to raise more money between now and the end of our tenure, and get an approval from the commission to fund these as the funds are available. Rather than have yet another round where we're going to disappoint 90% of the applicants, we can take these and use these for general fundraising as well as very targeted fundraising. So just keep that in mind. At this point, with the 20,000 that we had allocated, we can fund the number 1 and 2 projects, no problem. And that leaves $5,000 for the number 3 project, with the idea that we will continue to move forward and try to raise that other 5,000. But not only will we do that, we'll try to raise the rest of the money for these other 4 projects. And I think there's opportunities like for instance, if you look at number 5, the Ski for Life, I believe we have opportunities to get restricted funds from interested entities for that particular project. So we can move forward as a committee, as a group, and expend our energies not towards doing a whole nother round of funding, but to try to get these very worthy projects funded. So that's going to be a proposal that I want us to discuss. But before we make any decisions, I think we have to think about this somewhat collectively, given the new numbers that we have. So why don't we move on to the next section, which is the 20, actually, I think there was 23 on that list, but Ski for Life ended up on both of them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, ranked relatively high in both of them. So that one, regardless of what we characterize that as, it's one of our projects. So,
Mark, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess, sorry to interrupt, Carl. I guess I wanted to just circle back to the full committee for a second on the outdoor equity ones and just see if there are any reflections or questions from the members of the committee at large on those projects or the process we went through. And just
Mark, I wondered if it would be helpful to just give a quick summary of the top 3, or if we can.
yeah, sure. I'll give a run at it. You can chime in too.
Okay.
The first one, Exploring Nature in Lense, was put forward by the Youth Lense Initiative, which is a group in sort of deep southeast Portland, if you will, that's been working with youth. And basically their program has been, they start up in the spring. They have maybe as many as 40 students or post-high school, college-age kids that are involved in training. They're working with 4 partners, including Portland Public Parks, Leach Botanical Gardens, the Johnson Creek Watershed Council, and a group called Green Lense. And they have workshops and training in the spring, and then from that, each of those organizations offers an internship during the summer. So anywhere from 4 to 6 of those people participate with that partner organization during the course of the summer. They have a really great video that we've watched. It's really clear that they're connecting strongly with diverse youth in a meaningful sort of way. That was the first one. The second one, People of Color Outdoor and Urban Teen. That was one that really makes an effort to take young people out, diverse backgrounds, and have an experience camping, hiking, and being outside. And it felt very compelling because I think sort of that sense of the way you get people connected with the outdoors is being outdoors, going outdoors, and having a positive experience. So they had an existing program, and part of this funding was to continue that effort going forward. And then the third one, the BIPOC Conservation Strategy, sponsored by Wild Diversity, which is, again, another local group. Marat, maybe you can help me. I can't remember specifically what they were going to do, but again, it was connecting youth to the outdoors there.
what I recall of that one, Mark, their goal was to get those individuals involved in actual conservation efforts and work done that was meaningful to them. And part of what they were doing is helping to identify what's meaningful and get those individuals involved in restoration. I'll just tell you that when I was researching these projects, I went to their website and looked at Wild Diversity, and I ended up donating money to them just because what incredible work they're doing. So that's a really good project. I really like the approach they're taking, and it is really quite good. Marat, I'm sorry I jumped in there. Do you have anything else on that one?
Just that the other good thing about that one was that it's wide ranging. It was appealing to Coast Range, East Cascades, Willamette Valley, and West Cascades. So it wasn't just in one region, it was really reaching out.
Mauricio, your input into this whole thing was really critical and for us to make good decisions. And do you have anything you'd like to add to what?
Well, what I really love about these 3 projects is this whole notion of not just like, here's some money, do what you can, but how is it that we nurture a long-lasting relationship with the conservation efforts that we are ultimately, our ultimate goals here. And so I think that they have a very well thought out plan of how that happens. Is very tangible. And you can see what, so for instance, with the Nature and Lense one, they are opening the doors for folks to find careers in conservation environmentalism and grow that love for the field. And so we are creating a legacy, and they have very specific steps to do that because they themselves are part of the communities in which they work, which I love. Same with People of Color Outdoors. They're trying to identify what, for both People of Color Outdoors and for wild diversity, they're members of these communities that have lived in experience and can identify the type of markers that will resonate with those communities to create a long-lasting connection with our general efforts. And that to me is invaluable. So I was very pleased with how we reached these top 3.
I'll reiterate that Mauricio's input into this process was crucial. And the other 4, without getting specific about them, they were great. They were all good. We wanted to fund them all. And they're all worthy. So anybody else have any comments before we move on to the other other list of projects? Davia, can you put that next list up, and then we'll just have a more general discussion about where we're going to draw some lines here.
I have it ready, Davia, if you want me to pull it up. If you don't,
I was going to say Sherilyn has a more dynamic version. I have the PDF.
Yeah, I will open my version. So how would you like? So this is in proposal order right now, Carl. But I also
do it in how we ranked them. Yep, like that. Yep, perfect.
Tell me how well you can view it, and I can scroll around.
I can see it. Is everybody else able to read that? Okay. Well, let me tell you, I just got a really good feeling when she just put it up. I'm really, again, I'm so proud of this. I'm so proud of what we're doing and what we're able to accomplish here. It's really makes me personally feel really good. And then I feel really bad because where we're funding is not very many. And I'll say, as you recall, we separated out these, and again, I'm going to count this as 22 because Key for Life is on the other list. We separated these out because they were all in somebody's top 4. And all of these projects are worthy and worthwhile. This doesn't show them all. The list goes down to 22. As you can see, there's multiple worthy projects. So, Sherilyn, go back up. So what we have a couple of things to think about. One is, just like we identified the top 3 and are proposing that we fund that from the Outdoor Equity Subcommittee, I would propose that we look at these in the order that they're ranked. We vetted them in terms of geography and taxonomy, and those top 4 or 5 projects cover a very nice range. With the geography is quite diverse, the taxonomy is diverse, particularly because number 5, the Harney County one, is mostly birds, sage grouse. So that covers our taxonomy. Those top 5 or 6 projects, 4 to 6 projects, I think are really attractive. I don't feel we would gain a lot by nitpicking and trying to move things around from the lower group, moving them up, etc. Especially in the context of what I'm going to propose we talk about and how to deal with all these other great projects. It's very similar to what I said about the outdoor equity projects. Every one of these projects deserves to be funded. We're going to raise money going forward. What I would propose is we're going to have to move the money around and see just what we're able to fund with the numbers we have. And just pick the top ones in order and allocate the money to them, but approve all of these as fundable projects, as projects that we would be proud to fund, intend to fund. Take the entire list to the commission, say, we want to fund all of these, and we'll do it as the funds arrive. The details of that we would have to work out within the committee, but the general concept is that we're going to let each of these entities that propose these projects know that our intention is fully to fund them. It so happens that the total number of projects is 270,000. We're going to fund about 60,000 of that. That's around 210. Even in the worst case scenario, if we didn't raise another dollar between now and when we have been promised the match, we're still going to be able to fund these projects if we have to use the match to do it. My anticipation is we will raise, and my anticipation and hope is we'll raise the entire amount by the end of the year to fund these projects. Because I think there's a lot of strategies we can employ to use both general fundraising as well as targeted, restricted fundraising for each project. I'm already, like for instance, the Ski for Life one, I already have some entities targeted for that one for very specific restricted funds to fund that. The same is true for the Klamath Basin Chinook salmon study. I believe we could get some very targeted donations to that particular project. Okay, so there's no specifics in that in terms of the mechanics of how we do it, but I'm going to put it out there if you need more clarification of what, and we've discussed this in the steering committee and on the outdoor equity committee, and we're all pretty much on board with that. And so I'm putting it out there to all of you that weren't part of those conversations to ask questions or give your concerns or your support for that basic concept moving forward.
This is Jane. I have a little concern that, I have two concerns. One is that if we have too many projects that we are trying to raise money for, we may not raise enough for any of them. And that if we were a little bit more selective in, maybe half the list, so that we have maybe 5 to 10 projects people could donate to, that we would be more likely to be successful in raising the money that's needed. The second concern is that some of these projects, if you look at the scores, were deemed more worthy than others. And there may be some other projects out there that we haven't heard from yet that are more worthy than some of the projects that are lower on this list. So an alternate approach would be to pick 5 or 10 projects that we want to have on our short list of things that we would like to see money come in for. That would be enough that there would be some diversity of people could find one that was the kind of thing they wanted to fund, but it wouldn't spread the money so thinly. And we could always have the option at our next meeting to add additional projects to that list if we wanted to do that. So that's just an idea, but I'll go along with what other people think.
Well, Jane, I'll take that as a support for just that concept that I threw out there of rather than, and your point is very well taken about the other projects that are out there. and let me address that. I agree, there are definitely other projects. In fact, I know of some myself. However, we can still entertain those projects on a case-by-case basis without having an open solicitation. I think we can operate under the assumption that the committee members themselves can bring projects to our attention that we might consider. And in particular, if there is restricted funds potentially available for those projects, where someone knows, I guess the point is there's ways to bring other projects in without having a whole nother open solicitation that we can vet. Because once again, as we've done here, we had an open solicitation, got 65 projects, and it looks like we're going to fund 6 of them, maybe 7. That's 10%. That's a lot of work for people to do an open solicitation proposal with a 10% chance of getting funded. That's like trying to get into Harvard or something. So I think we need to, while what I'm proposing doesn't preclude getting other projects, it just means that they would be more, so we'd be much more selective in how we approach that.
I just thought of one other reason to make it a shorter list, and that would be for people that are further down on the list, you don't want to hold out hope that they're going to get funding when there are more compelling projects that might get that funding instead. And so they probably might need to go look for other funding and not hold out hope that they might come to this program.
That's a good point.
And I agree. In fact, Jane, as part of the steering committee conversation, I also brought up a similar point. And I think maybe there is a system that we can come up with in which, if there are new projects that can get included, perhaps we just, if we received in between now and the next committee meeting, we received 1 or 2, we can maybe ask for committee members to rank them in the exact same criteria that we've did and see how they stand in comparison to the ones that are in the queue. But the other thing that also needs to be considered is that many of these projects that are not being funded right away and may not be until we do get the match. If and when we do get the match, maybe some of them are in a timeline that just needs to either happen in the near future. Now, so that may be something that also we need to consider as we start having the ability to fund further proposals down the line. So is it still timely? Is this something that doesn't have necessarily an ending term for when the viability would change? So anyway, those are 2 variables that we probably need to consider. But I am, of course, on board with making a commitment to fund as many of these, if not all, the worst case scenario by the time the funds are matched.
Tim, have you got any thoughts on this?
I think you're on mute, Tim.
Oh, Tim's video is off. Oh, there he is, Tim.
He's there. He's just working on the mute.
All right, there I am, finally unmuted. I like the thought of the ones that are at the bottom of the list. I agree. They don't need to hold out hope because, by the time that we get there and, it could be halfway through the year, hopefully not, but worst case scenario, we got to look at there too. And, if we're halfway through the year and half their project's already done, how's that funding going to help them in ways? But I do like, figuring out a way to divide this up and support, the top ones, and however we decide to do that, we'll figure out. So
do remember that this is a coned down list from 65. So we're still not even funding half of them if we do these. So it's not like that the bottom one on this list is the bottom.
True.
One on the list is still like in the top 20 or top 25. Chris Hager?
Mark, did you want to go first? You just put your hand up.
No, go ahead if you're ready, for sure.
No, it's just tough. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed or like the idea what Mauricio was saying. Having what if we have projects coming in the middle, but at the same time, Tim makes a great point. It's like if these things time out, then it's just almost like as much as I hate having people re-invite them to do the work again or not necessarily do the work again, but reapply, maybe that makes the most sense to update our list after this first round goes through. But yeah, or second round really.
Yeah.
Let me reiterate.
I've looked at the list on my computer and realized that some of my favorite projects are in that bottom 10 or so. And so I might change my mind about that. And Carl, good point about that these are the top 20 as opposed to the top 65. So I don't know.
Well, here
I would think quite a few things could be on that list.
Let me reiterate where I see it. Part of the reason we are proposing this is we have 6 months really before our time is up unless we're reauthorized. So it's a lot of time and effort on everybody's part to run one of these proposals, solicitation. And I think we as a committee need to focus all of our efforts in the next 6 months on funding these projects and getting money in the door, and not be distracted by having to review projects, get them all, so do a solicitation. And this next round is because we now have to follow the typical rules for the state. It would take 6 months. It's going to be a 6-month process to do another funding round. We can't do this accelerated funding round we've done here lately. So that's another reason why I would like for us to, and again, there are projects out there, but there has to be a very compelling reason to bring them into the fold. And right now, as far as I'm concerned, the most compelling is matching funds, where there will be restricted funds associated with it, and we can bring that in, because that's what our goal needs to be. Okay, so again, we can work out the details. Part of this is just seeing if we're all on board with the concept. Mark Labhart, I'd love to hear what you think about the direction we're headed here.
Well, I was just responding to Davia there, so I'll get, boy, this is a tough one, because I understand, and it's I've not heard this proposal before, so I'm trying to, I think like some of the others that weren't part of the executive committee or others, I'm trying to digest it, the pros and cons. I think that, if there's some people that come up with some restricted gifts between now and, the next legislative session, and they want to get those funded, that's low hanging fruit. That's easy for the advisory committee to recommend those. If it's a turtle project or a wildlife crossing or an economic analysis or whatever, I think those would be easy to add to the list if they aren't already on the list. I'm thinking I'm just going to ramble here, but I'm kind of thinking out loud. We could keep the list together, and then maybe ask, after you've made your recommendations today for the January meeting, ask the applicants, you didn't make the cut, your project's very worthy, do you want to stay in the queue? And if they say, well, thank you, we'd love to stay in the queue, then great, you're in the queue. But if they say, well, what do you mean? I mean, are we going to get funded ever, or are we going to be in the queue for 6 months, or what? You know, we could say, well, we're not sure. It depends on the fundraising. And so if they want to stay in the queue, they can. If they say, well, thank you, we'll wait for the next open round. And then that was the next thing I was thinking about as everybody was talking, is we could close it and then come back and say, okay, we've got another round of funding. And then we go back to this list and go back to the priorities and reach out to each of them and say, okay, you're next on the list. Do you want to be funded, or have you already been funded, or has your amount requested changed, so that we know, we kind of update things as we go along. And then, you know, we don't know when that's going to be because we don't have the money right now, but we could just ask folks if they want to reapply at that point in time because you're in the queue. And I fully understand where you're coming from, Carl. There's been a lot of work put into all these projects, and there's been a lot of work put by the committee into these projects, and they're all good projects. But clearly, of the 65, and we know that a lot of them are going to be so far down the list that it could be years before we raise that funding to fund further down the list, and there might be other projects that come along. So I'm rambling, but I kind of see pros and cons of, you know, staying the course. These are really good projects, but maybe cutting it off and saying, okay, we're just going to fund the amount now. When we raise more money, we'll come back to you and ask these questions of you. And I'm repeating myself, but I'm trying to summarize. We'll ask you, you're in the queue, you're number 6, and we've just funded through 5, and now you're number 6, you're next on the list. Do you still want to be funded, or have you decided to go somewhere else because we're already 6 months down the road? So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Those are good thoughts, Mark. And in fact, when we were talking about this, I realized this is going to take some outreach on all of our parts. And my intention was going to be to call everybody on this list and have a conversation with them and explain where we're at. And so I agree with that. I see that Mark Stern and Mauricio have something to say, but I'd like to hear from Kalen first. He hadn't said anything about this.
Yeah, good conversation. I've just been following along, and I'm not sure I've seen anything like this. So I actually had a question back for Commissioner Labhart, just whether this sort of proposal is something that the commission would entertain, even if it's new, and any feedback on that. And I think we just heard some ideas there. I know that for my own commission, to my knowledge, we haven't sort of provisionally approved projects. There's just sort of a hard decision point, unfortunately. And then I have a second brief comment after we hear a little bit more from Commissioner Labhart, I think.
Well, Kayla, I can't speak for the commission. Of course, you know that, but I just have a personal opinion. I would say it would be tough for the commission to, we first trying to make sure that they understand exactly what's being proposed, but then to provisionally approve these with no funding tied to them. I don't know. It just seems like, you know, I'm trying to think. Carl and I both have I sit on the OWEB board right now, and Carl has sat on the OWEB board, and we get, you know, dozens and dozens of applications for funding. And we have certain periods of time where we cut the funding off and then we come back. And sometimes the Watershed Council would come back with a similar proposal that didn't get funded, but now we have the money to fund that. So they're back in the queue again. And so they just go back through the process. We don't provisionally fund a whole bunch of projects ahead of time and say, well, when we get the money, we'll come back and fund you. We have an open period and a closing period, and you can come back and apply again. So I kind of lean toward that, but again, I can be swayed because these are all good projects. But I think if we cut this off at a certain point with the funding that you're going to recommend today for the January meeting, and then say you're provisionally approved, but we're probably going to have to come back with an open session and ask you again to either reapply with your same project because you're in the queue and you're really highly ranked right now, but you didn't make that cutoff line. And that's the same problem that we have with OWEB. We have this cutoff line where really good projects are below that line, but we still say to them, it's a good project, we really want to fund you, but we just don't have the money right at this point in time. So come back to us again. And sometimes they change their project. Sometimes they've got match money. Sometimes they've added to it. And so it might change the project, but some of them might say, well, it's the exact same project and they might be above the line the next time. I hope that helped a little bit.
Yeah. Let me remind you that if we were to have another funding round, they're going to have to wait 6 months anyway. Because of the time frame of this, and we have to hold proposals for 2 months before we can evaluate them. That's this expedited thing we've been in for these first 2 rounds that we can no longer do. We would not be funding these projects till June or July anyway, if we made them reapply. So again, I think we're going to be raising money every week through the ODF&W site, through the website, and this is a mechanism to get that money out the door as soon as it comes in. And that's the attractive part for me. Plus, I also think it gives people an incentive to say, look, here's what we're trying to fund. We are trying to raise the money for these projects right now. When you give us $10, it's not just going into the ether. This is where it's going. So
we have a couple hands up. With Chris had his hand up. Do you still want to say something, Chris, to follow up from Mark Labcart's comments?
Just had a second half brief comment, which is, yes, that was helpful, and thank you. I know, speaking from your experience, Mark, was great to hear. And I guess just doubling down on what some others have said, the fact that this program is kind of oversubscribed in some ways, right? That we're looking at a 10% of the identified need, or the applications that have come in. To me, when you're thinking about audiences, does make a very compelling case about how OCRF is really addressing a gap. And so while that might not be as compelling to an individual donor, I think it does sort of speak to the strength and the need of the program overall, because lots of different grant programs that I have some familiarity with are significantly less competitive than this. I can't think of any that are at a 10% rate. And so when it comes to kind of making the pitch for continued OCRF funding, that's a strength. And I guess the worst we can do is ask, or that the committee could do is ask for this sort of provisional approval and see what happens. It is a creative approach. And that's it. Thanks.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I've been thinking about is that, I mean, Carl, I think the way that you guys are planning fundraising and all intentions of meeting our goal, we're going to have to open up, because we'll have more money theoretically to fund all these projects. And so we're going to have to open up a new process anyway. And so I'm just going back and forth at the same time of, playing devil's advocate. If we don't raise enough money, then are we creating false hope at the same time?
There's a lot of hands. Mark, I know you had your hand up earlier, and then we can go to Jane. Mark's turn.
Yeah, I guess a lot of thoughts that come together, but I guess for me, the sort of a friendly amendment to Mark Labart, your comments there. I think there's some benefit to, if it's possible, to get an approvable list in front of the commission, because again, you know, at least as we currently stand, our authority goes away June 30th. So hopefully we'll be extended, but that's not, that hasn't happened yet. So rather than, you know, OWEB, which has, you know, a predictable ongoing cycle is funded, you know, lottery funds pending, if you will. I think we do have some benefit to just getting an approvable list that we could work from. If money comes in, we just go right down the list from the ones that are at the top and pick them off as we can. The only exception would be if there's some restricted funds that come in for some of the other projects that might be lower on the list. That would allow them to receive those restricted funds and be in consideration for funding as well. So I think given the potential longevity that we currently have for OCRF, we'd be thoughtful to get an approvable list forward. And I think, Chris, to your point, and others too, I think we have to be really clear about expectations to everybody here. And we really have to say, this is an approvable list if and when we get additional funding. And kind of to your point, Mark, we can go back and ask them, and if you're next in the queue and we have another $10,000, we ask if they're still ready to go as proposed or not. And so that'd be my thought, to try and manage it within the 6.5 month time period that we at least are currently scripted for.
Jane?
So I think we've maybe strayed from what was the most powerful thing in this discussion as it started out. And that was how great it would be as a fundraising tool to be able to put on our website, here are 5 more or 10 more projects that we could fund if you want to make a donation to them. And, you know, I'm just thinking of the donors that I know of, that if I gave them that option, they would go, yeah, I would love to give money for this particular project, as opposed to like, I just want to put more money in the fund. So what I liked best about Carl's proposal was the strength of it as a fundraising tool. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of hybrid solution that could involve a goal being to be able to put a few of these up on the website as things that people could specifically donate to.
Marat?
I was going to say exactly what Jane said, that this came out really as a fundraising strategy, because so many nonprofits are struggling right now too. We've been trying to engage with our coalition, but everybody's having a hard time making their own payroll, and how are they going to help us? And if they had a project in the works, that would give them some inspiration to help, so we could sort of strengthen our coalition. The coalitions could be helping us with the fundraising. If you were raising money for your own project, it would be more inspiring.
Ratio?
Yeah, so I keep hearing, like, things are not done this way, and there's this risk, or this is very unconventional. But I'd like to remind the committee members that the very existence of this fund is unconventional and is unorthodox, and is because it was responding to the gap that Kaylin was speaking about. We are the kind of vehicle that would provide hope for those projects and organizations that may not have it elsewhere. And so I'm really not have much of a problem with the whole idea of providing hope to these folks that put this time in getting all these projects together and say, yeah, we are committing to fund you because we know what this is all about, and we appreciate that. And I also like the idea of Commissioner Leppard saying, do you want to stay in the queue? Meaning, is your project depending on time? Is there feasibility depending on a timeline that we may not be able to meet by June of next year? But going back to the whole unconventional nature of our fund, I think one of the things that I really like about this is that we can see the people behind the projects, and we can see the people on the advisory committee, and see these as like, I, as a person, would rather hear yeah, we don't have the money right now, but we are doing everything we can so that you can have your project done. Because again, if our objective is to try to make everyone a conservationist, that sort of promise, that sort of commitment is the kind of thing that would appeal to me as an individual, saying like, the folks behind this are doing everything they can, so of course I will believe in what you're doing. And here comes my $10. So and now in a more practical sense, I feel this just might be some simple math, meaning if we go at the bottom of this list, if I remember correctly, the total amount is something like 205,000. And so if we look at the funds so far we've raised, like Carl said, if we don't raise a single dollar more, we should be able to fund these folks at, you know, if legislation holds, of course, and that's something that we have to say up front, at the worst case scenario by June. Now, if we raise even more funds, that may be the way in which we welcome new ideas and proposals into the fold. Because if by January we have an extra 20 grand, that means 4 more proposals can come in by June. And so, I don't know, I don't have much of a problem saying, you know, the nature of hope is also disappointment. And we've been able to pivot since the fund started, from not being able to meet in person to making all this stuff work virtually. We are the definition of changing course as the challenges are also shifting. And I don't think that we should be restricted by the way things are done, because you know, times are different and challenges change. And we've proven that we've decided to stand up and respond as best as we can to them. So I don't see why we need to change that policy.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts and comments on this? I'm tempted to share my screen to capture some notes I've been taking. Do you think that would be useful?
Sure, that'd be great.
Before I switch over to that, I'm making an assumption right now that committee members are fairly supportive of funding these first 4 projects, or recommending that the commission fund these 4 projects in January. Is that true? Before I show my notes. And we're really talking about what to do with the rest of the projects.
I think that's great. Thank you, Sherilyn. I think one of the things we can do, let's just remember those 3 projects came to 25,000.
Right.
And then you have these 4 projects, so that's 65,000. I think it's fairly safe to conclude that we're going to have 65,000 by the time of the commission meeting in January. That we should, given all projections, have another 5,000. And there's another point there too, is we could raise even more. And that's the reason to have a approvable list. By the time we get to the commission meeting, we might be able to go to project 5 or project 6 and say we want to fund these because we have the money. So that's why I don't want to just do a cutoff of where we have the funds currently. So in any event, if we could, right now, I think if the committee is comfortable with saying, yes, we're going to fund those in that order, the first 3 outdoor equity pieces, the top 4 general proposal list, then that covers us as far as where our funds are today. And then we can hammer out how we're going to deal with the rest of the projects going forward. So I would put that out as a proposal, and actually to the point of even a motionable motion. Are we comfortable with funding those, what does that become, 7 projects? Oh, yeah, those 7 projects with the funding that we have available?
You guys
Is it-
can see my PowerPoint now instead of the Excel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Did you already do that? How did you do that so fast, Sharon?
I was doing it in the background, Carl, while I was listening.
You did that before. I didn't even read that. You did that while I was thinking of it. That's very good. All right. All right. So that, I think that reads really well. And then, so
The only sort of question, so before we go on, Carl, are you trying to get a motion for the first bullet there?
I think so, yes. And let me, Davia, how do you feel about the process? Is this the time to ask for that top proposal?
I think that would be really good for the committee to take that action, close out that business, and have a recommendation for the commission, and then talk about what to do with the proposals not funded today.
Great. Okay, so is someone able to or willing to make that proposal listed as number 1 on Sherilyn's list?
And I'm not sure this is great language. Davia is always better at the motion language, but.
Yeah, I have a draft. I can switch to that if you want.
Okay.
So I just threw out the first one there, and so that is the 7 project numbers.
Okay, you have the numbers. Thanks, Davia.
And then I guess one thought, I'll go back here for editing, sorry, is do we want to make a statement as part of this motion about what happens if we don't have 65,000 by then?
Which is the bottom one on the, is that the Beaver project? This is the 4th one, the Coast Beaver project?
The Beaver project is project number 53. And then the 3rd project on outdoor equity is project number 61.
Right.
Well, what I would propose that in this be that we are going to fund those 6 projects there, 43, 13, 61, 38, 17, and 3, and $5,000 to 53. Then we have the money today. But in this, we'll say if we're successful in raising the remaining $5,000 between now and then, it'll go to 53. That way we're funding that wild diversity project in full. And we'll, I think, very likely fund 53 in full. But that's a way to at least keep the bookkeeping straight and not promise something we don't have.
Do we need to ask 53 whether they could do any good with 5,000?
Yeah, I mean, that's, if we can get this approval, I'll call them and tell them exactly what's happening and that we likely will get 5,000, but we might not. And what does that mean to them? But this way, it's, yeah, I like this. This is a lot cleaner. We're not promising something we don't have.
How's that sound?
Yeah. And because actually what happens is if we don't raise the $5,000, we actually have to get a whole nother proposal with the $5,000 out of it. So we really got to work on getting that $5,000 because that's going to be a pain in my butt. So, and obvious. So yeah, I like that. So it's going to be the top line and the bottom line. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we have a motion that would include, that could be read together, the top line and the bottom line, skipping the middle two. Does anyone care to propose that?
I'll do it. Are we ready, Navia, or do we?
Go for it.
Okay. I move that the committee recommends projects number 43, 13, 61, 38, 17, and 3 as proposed in the December 9 meeting materials for consideration by the Commission. I move that the committee recommends project number 53 as proposed in the December 9th meeting materials, including changing the total amount to $5,000 with approval from the applicant, and to increase the amount to $10,000 if the money becomes available for consideration by the Commission.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Murat. All in favor, thumbs up. Nice. Okay, well, that's good. That's good to get that done. And actually, if you look at that portfolio, that is a sweet bunch of projects. I'm proud of that. You should all be proud of that. I really love having the Bumblebee one being the top project. I'm really digging that. That's a wonderful thing. So I'm totally thrilled with that all by itself. But if we can fund the rest of these projects, just think how good that'll be. And Mauricio, I'm going to thank you, as is the usual case, with you hitting the nail on the head when you talked about how this is not your usual committee. This is not the same old, same old. And thank you very much for pointing that out, because we're breaking ground, and we're just going to keep breaking ground. So thanks for your comment there.
Jane, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think, Carl, when you talked to, I believe it was the Wetlands Conservancy about Project 53, they could certainly use this as an opportunity to get some end of year donations in too, if we can. Well, actually, probably not end of year, but because by the time this gets approved, it'll be too late. But it would be interesting for them to use this as a fundraising opportunity of, like, we can get this money, but we have to raise more, and you can donate to this fund and the money will go to us. So I like that a lot, actually. And I probably will donate some money myself, just.
Jane, I'm glad you see it, because I think that's the way it's going to go. When we have actual projects that it's like, oh, I like that.
Right.
I think it's going to go. And maybe it won't, but we're breaking ground. We're going to figure out if it's going to work or not. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I actually probably will just write a check, or not write a check, but go online later today and give some money, because I know that's the project's going to go to, and I like that project.
I hope everybody in the audience just heard that as well. And see, now we're going to have this public webinar tonight. And believe me, we're going to put that out there. And so, okay, so that was a big achievement. We're actually pretty good on time. I would like for us to more or less agree on how we're going to deal with these remaining projects. We've dealt with 7 of them. So that leaves, I guess, what is the actual total left? Is that like
It's
19 maybe?
Yeah, it should be 22. Or you mean the whole list of the outdoor equity, not just
Outdoor equity and
that'd be 13 and 22 is the full list.
No. The 7 from the outdoor equity, the 22 from the general list, that's 29. We funded 7, so it's 22.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to ask, but the outdoor equity list started at 13, so I didn't know if you were.
Yeah, we're only doing the 7.
Okay. So yeah.
Again, to remind everyone, we're funding less than half of these projects.
Mhm.
We're funding less than half. So it's not like we're diving deep into the barrel. All these top projects are good projects. And some of the ones and that's not to say the ones that we didn't even consider in this aren't good projects. So we should feel good about these particular projects. So we have 22 projects to have on our list. And how are we, again, our thought about this when the steering committee met was that we would take this, again, in a very innovative way to the commission and say, look, my argument would be, look, if we'd have had the money, we'd have funded them. If we'd have had $205,000, they'd be funded. Well, we might get $205,000 by the end of the year, and we certainly will get it with the match. We want to fund these projects. And so we're asking pre-approval, in part because we're already giving these folks a delay. If we have the pre-approval, as soon as the money comes in the door, we can put it out to them. We don't have to wait to the next commission meeting. We have the pre-approval. And again, this is backed up by the fact that the number would be covered in the worst case scenario by the match. And of course, in my conversation with the different parties, it make it very clear that it's always possible the legislature does what legislators do and not fund us. But that has to be very clear. So are we comfortable with having this list, the remaining 22, that we will bring to and they could say no. But if they do, well, they said no. But if they say yes, then we're all comfortable with using this list to fund. And then we have to we'll have to come up with some logistics on how we're going to go about that. The simplest thing, of course, is just to fund them in order. That gets a little complicated if we're able to get restricted funds for those particular projects. Maybe that moves them up in the queue, or maybe not. Those are the kind of discussions that we would have to have. The second discussion is going to be on those projects that are out there that we think are worthy, that we may bring into the consideration without an open solicitation. So with that all being said, we've achieved in some ways what we need to for today. So we can take these, well, first of all, I guess I need to get everyone's approval to take this list of 22 projects to the commission for provisional approval. And if we have that, then we've done what we need to today. A lot of the details, I believe we can work out at a second meeting. So we have time, everyone has time to digest all this. What it means is Davia and I were thinking we maybe wouldn't meet till February, but I think we may need to meet in January. And if it's to get this kind of thing done, I'm happy myself to meet again in January and try to nail some of this down. It's important enough. And then maybe we could skip a February meeting. The other reason I'm skipping ahead in the agenda a little bit, we got to talk a little bit about what's going on the legislative front. And so having a meeting in January is probably worthwhile. So with that being said, have you guys been furiously writing in the background a proposal for these 22? Davia, I can't believe how good you are at this stuff.
I have a motion. I have not filled in the 22 project numbers. So I was thinking perhaps an easier way to do it would be to say the projects ranked number 5 through 23.
Yes, and 4 through 7.
Yep.
So that would be number 5 to 23 on the
main list.
on the
Actually,
list.
with the exception of proposal 16, the Ski for Life, which is on the other list.
Yeah, I would make it 5 through 22 because Ski for Life should be on the outdoor equity piece.
Yeah, that wouldn't help us though on the tracking front because it's on the.
Yeah, it's in the middle of the ranking. It's not. It's the project ranked number 10, Davia.
Okay.
You can have a way of just.
We could put it on either list. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then it would be projects number 4 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
God, this is great, actually. And that tees it up for us to figure out how to deal with these, it's not urgent, unless all of a sudden we get $60,000 in the next 2 weeks, then it'll be a lot more urgent.
I see the note from.
He's going to write a check later today. Maybe we'll have that.
I'm actually doing it right now.
For 60,000, great.
No, not 60,000, but I'm making a donation on my other screen here. So keep me looking to the side is what I'm doing.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jane. I hope you all are inspired by Jane. Okay, I think that reads, yeah. Yeah, that's good. That covers it because 10 is the Ski for Life one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on the outdoor equity piece.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone want to read that one? Somebody do it.
I'll do it.
Great, Maria.
I move that the committee recommends that the commission provisionally approve the projects ranked 5 through 23 on the primary list in the December 9 meeting materials, excluding the project ranked number 10 and the projects ranked 4 to 7 on the outdoor equity subcommittee's recommendation in the December 9th meeting materials for expenditures when funds become available.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, thumbs up. All right. Looks great.
Did you vote, Mark?
I didn't vote. I guess I'm puzzling on, I'm fine with the motion, but I don't think you can take that motion to the commission unless you figured out the process that goes with it. So. I think that's what they would ask you.
I agree with Mark, and that was what I was going to say next. So
Okay.
this committee is recommending that the commission take a look at those projects and asking for the commission's approval to expend money for those projects if we get the money, but the commission will ask how, for sure.
That's
and the
good
project proponents will ask how.
Well, then what I would say is this might be the time for us to bring them this and to say the next commission meeting will bring to you the details on how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I guess that's why I asked in the chat, when is the January ODF&W commission meeting?
It's Friday, January 15th.
Which day?
15th of January.
So we could have that meeting on how to deal with this in the first part of January.
What we would need is just to add at the end of this, or like pending the criteria for selection, and then make a commitment to make that available on the January meeting. Is that what we need to add there, we imagine?
I think we'd be advised to have it figured out before going to the commission meeting, because
Okay.
I think just cleaner.
Okay. I mean, so not to send it right now, but wait until the January one for the second portion of the ask, right?
Or maybe, you know, there's a subcommittee that works on a draft, something that could be shared among the committee in advance, or somehow continue the conversation so we can work it out. Because I think we're circling around the same sorts of things, but maybe have somebody work on pulling that together and sharing with the committee so that, I don't know, Davi, if we can approve things by email as a committee without having a formal meeting, or just sort of, what are our options for settling that?
Great question. I have to look at the rules more explicitly. I'm not sure that you can approve things by email. And the other consideration here is January 15th is the deadline for the commissioner, is when we would be in front of the commission, but the deadline to get our materials to the commissioners is going to be significantly before that. And I think it might be between Christmas and New Year's. And so time-wise, there might not be enough time for that. So one option could be that the committee is making this recommendation, but not taking it to the commission in January, and that the committee is going to spend more time on it. And that would mean asking the commission to support the 7 projects in January and going back perhaps in February with a plan for the rest of the projects.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest as well, Davia. You take the first thing in January, you give the committee time to work out the process and take it in February.
So I have a question. So is the hesitation that we don't have a system as to how we're going to come to the money to fund the remaining ones, or how we're selecting the ones that get funded next?
I think the question is more is how do we select the ones that are funded next as money arrives?
Well, that could be quite simple if we wanted to do it that way. And that is, we would fund them in order that they're ranked. Unless, of course, there's restricted funds. Then those restricted funds would go to directly to the project. I'm inspired by Mauricio's words about our innovative situation. I'm going to take something to the commission. They may say no, but I'm going to take something to them in the January meeting. And so let's come up with something simple, like what I just said. We are going to fund these based on their ranking, with the exception of restricted funds. That's a fair way to do it. That's all we have to do. We don't have to have another meeting to hash that out. We already funded 7 projects based on their order. So we're going to fund them in that very order. And of course, if they say, oh, it's too late for us, we don't want the money, well, we'll just go to the next one. So I want to take that to the commission. And if they don't like it, then we can revisit it. But again, we're operating under we got 6 months, man. February's coming. February's knocking at the door. We got to make this happen. And if they say no, they say no.
Right. Do you think that covers some of the ambiguity, Mark?
Yeah, I do. I think.
Should I share my screen with what some of that looks like? Okay. Sorry, Davia, to take away the sharing from you. It always feels so rude. Go ahead, Mark. My computer's acting strange. You were in the middle of saying.
Well, I think it's some language around the lines that we would continue to fund these approved projects or approvable project as funding becomes available in the order they are ranked.
Mhm.
Noting, however, if restricted funds come in, we will work with that project to see if we can advance it as well.
So this would be for the process details, right?
Davia, are you writing up a
Amended motion.
draft motion?
I would say on the bottom, it'd say, rather than unless restricted funds, say if restricted funds are obtained for a specific project, we will work with that applicant.
The other question is, we have two separate lists here.
Right.
And so going in order on two separate lists, how do you determine what's next?
That's a good point.
I have a suggestion on that. So we've as of right now, we've sort of made a fraction commitment, meaning that roughly around 25 to 30% of the general funds would be those that we're hopefully addressing outdoor equity. So as funds come in, we can keep track of where those that proportionality goes based on the next project on the queue for outdoor equity. It maintains the formula the same, just that we're addressing outdoor equity in the same manner.
That's a great way to deal with it. I love it.
So how do I need to?
You said 25 to 30. We got to pick which one.
Well, we went to with the 25 today. We're looking at 30.
We had talked about 30 as our number.
Is 30 the number that the committee feels comfortable with?
In the past, we had talked about using 30% as our number. So 30% of the funds would go to the would be allocated to the outdoor equity pieces, and then we would fund those in order.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue that was brought up, and I think is a good one, is that we don't really, so say they say yes, which is great. We don't want to put all of the projects up on the website for funding at the same time, that you'll maybe dilute everything so everybody gets $5 and nobody gets everything. So how would we address that here?
So
I don't think that's something the commission has to know. We can decide that internally. We might put 5 up at a time, the top 5 or the top 10 or something. But we don't have to hammer that particular detail out now.
I really like the fact that we're making a commitment today, and that the numbers seem right, and that the spirit of why we're doing this is, front and center. So,
And Mark Labhart, I'm going to have to, I think we're going to have to maybe do some groundwork leading up to this meeting, so we're not just dropping this on them. It's going to take some explanation. It's not that hard to understand, actually. I think once we have it all done, but maybe you and I could do some preliminary talk with some of the members to give them a heads up.
Yeah, let's talk. I agree with Mauricio totally, but the devil's always in the details too. And I agree that the process is plausible and moving ahead. Let me give a little bit of devil's advocate here. So let's say somebody wants to contribute a restricted fund of, I want to contribute $100 to the Turtle Project. And the Turtle Project is listed as number 22, or not, let's say 18 on the list of priority. and it's a $10,000 project. How does that restricted gift, how do we work with that applicant? Because we still have to raise, you know, $9,900 before that gift kicks in. So how do we work with that applicant? Because they're saying, I only want it to go to project 18 and it's restricted. The devil's going to be in the details with something like that. Does it just sit there until we can find the money to go down the list that far for project 18 of $100 dedicated fund?
I'm so sorry, Mark, and you're absolutely right. I mean, from a mathematical point of view, the way that I imagine this working out is, if $100, what proportion does it pertain to the, say, $10,000 that they're asking? And then that'd be the traction that we use as the criteria to move projects forward into the queue list. So if somebody has $5,000 out of a $10,000, then I'd imagine then they would go further to the top of the queue, because we only need to raise 5,000 more for them to be the next one to be funded. So if somebody puts on their website, I like 150, and then by the time we get to the tally, they have 500, then that means they have approximately 5% more chances to be moved up in the queue as the funds come in. So if we're keeping track of all the money that is being attained, I think we could have a fairly solid system as to how the rankings may vary over time.
But again, I think that those kind of details can be worked out. The simplest thing is to just say we're going to fund them in order as we've outlined. And the restricted funds can go to those programs, but doesn't necessarily mean they would move up. That adds a bit of complexity. And one way to avoid that would be to do what Moret said and just limit the number that you list on the website. But again, I don't think we need to go into those weeds just yet.
Well, but I like, you know, I don't want to throw cold water on it at all, because I think, I don't know if it was Moret or Jane, the concept is amazing, because we can now say to donors, here's the list of projects, and there's probably something for everybody in that list that says, you know, you can help fund this. And so we have something to actually, they can bite off now, rather than saying, give us $100 and trust us, you know.
Right.
They can fund it, and they can still give us $100 and trust us too. But you know, there's something they can chew on now, and there's something in that list for everybody. So I like the concept.
But what I would take to the commission is say, just basically this simple thing: we're going to fund them in priority, and then restricted funds will be directed to the specific projects. And then how we kind of work with that moving forward, we can work out some details down the road. I don't want to make it too complicated. It's already going to be, again, we're going to have to do some groundwork. So I would stick with a simple proposal like this, and we'll work out those details as they come. And we maybe as they arise. It's like, if a project gets $5,000, how are we going to deal with that? We'll deal with that when it happens. This, I think, is enough. I'm comfortable. I don't want to take too much complexity to them. I want to take something simple, funded on the priority of their scores with 30% dedicated to outdoor equity, and just with the note that restricted funds go to that specific project, and we'll work with the applicant. I think that is a excellent framework to bring to the commission. And once again, the worst thing is they say no, and we just have to rethink it all. Are you good with that, Davia? Does that sound all right to you?
Sure. I think to your point, we can bring it to the commission, and if that's okay with them, that'll work. And if it's not, we'll go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Davia
pointed out to me that she's only been working for the state for 3 years, so she's still got some innovative bones left in her body.
Moret, were you trying to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the unanswered question is, how is Mark with this? Mark Stern.
No, I think it's good. I like the idea of having these approvable projects in front of the commission and getting that lined out and ready to go. And I feel that at least this effort to describe process will help in that conversation. So yeah, I appreciate the extra time we took there. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for bringing that important point up.
And I don't know process-wise if we need to amend the motion or make changes. Mark is nodding, so I think he would like that. And does this do the trick to just make an additional motion?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that.
So I've just added a second motion to this slide here,
Right.
describing the
So
process.
I think we need, yeah.
Or I'd like to go back and rescind the previous motion and start over.
Before I should have asked for a comment before we got the second. I think that's the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, I actually think you voted on it too, Carl. So you've got to.
We didn't vote on it. No, Mark.
I thought you had all hands going up except for Mark Stearns.
Oh, you're right.
And I didn't even get a chance to count them all. He was
Good try though, Carl.
Okay, so let's just do this as a whole new one.
Yep.
Well, and process-wise, do you have to actively undo the last one?
Yes. How do we do that? Do we just say?
Never mind.
Just make another motion that supersedes that one. Just say this motion supersedes the previous motion, and then I think.
Yes, I like it. Supersedes, good word. Perfect. Okay.
And the order of events here is a motion, a second, discussion,
Okay.
and then maybe amendment or vote.
I didn't ask for the discussion. That would have given Mark a chance to say something. Okay, anyone willing to read this?
Yeah, I'll read it since I created the chaos here. So I move that the committee recommends that the commission provisionally approve the projects ranks number 5 through 23 on the primary list in the December 9th meeting materials, excluding the project rank number 10, and the projects rank number 4 through 7 on the outdoor equity subcommittee's recommendation in the December 9 meeting materials for expenditure when funds become available. Expenditures will be made in ranked order unless restricted funds become available for a specific project. This motion supersedes the previous motion on this subject.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Is that Moret?
Yes.
Thank you, Brett. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, can we have a vote? Thumbs up if you're in favor. All right. Sounds good. So we have something to take to the commission. Mark and I maybe will get together and talk about how to set the stage for that. Well, that saved another meeting. That's great. Thank you all. Mark Stern, thank you very much for catching that and bringing it up. All right then, that's a great segue into planning for 2021. And that includes when our next meeting is going to be. There's a couple of things happening. I mentioned the legislature. There's a lot of activity there. We had talked about having a meeting in February, giving us a bit of a break, but then we should meet sometime before March because that's when all the action's happening in the legislature. So I guess with this being disposed of, we don't need to meet in January. Is everyone okay with meeting again in February so we can discuss? And I'm sure there'll be things that come up with this process that we're going to need to discuss. And then there will be possibly some legislative issues to discuss. Are people good with February as a meeting? Looks good. So Davia will send out a doodle poll for that. Davia, is there anything else in that planning part you needed? You want to talk about that biannual report?
Yes, and I think if it's reasonable for you all, I'll just do a doodle poll for the full 6 months that we have left as a committee, in thinking a February meeting and then maybe a June meeting, just in case the legislature does not lift the sunset date. Then we could have a meeting in June to sort of close out if needed. And I think that would just save us from 2 doodle polls if we just do it all at once, if that's okay with you all. Okay, hearing no objection, I will do that. The other thing, the committee is on the hook to deliver a biennial report to the legislature on your work. And the rules for biennial reports are technically that the report period would end a year before the legislature meets. So essentially we would be reporting on your activities through June of this year, which would say the committee was formed. And so I think that we should be a little proactive beyond that and do a report through the end of 2020. And my proposal there is that staff will develop a draft report, share it with the committee members, and then adopt it at the February meeting and send it over to the legislature at that time.
So Davia and I are going to work on that, but we'll get it all to you.
And then the last thing, I just wanted to give you all a brief update on that particular subject of the sunset date set out in House Bill 2829 for this program. There is a lot of interest in removing or extending the sunset date. The department has a legislative concept that's been approved by the governor's office that we will be introducing that extends the sunset by 2 years. To give us more time on this program. Representative Helm's office has a myriad of legislative concepts that he will be introducing that will extend or remove the sunset, make sure the match comes through, and other opportunities for creating a more permanent fund source for the program. I do see Greg is on if the chair wants to invite him to make comment on that. And then the department is working with the governor's office on the governor potentially having a legislative concept that would also take action on this. So there's a lot there. The session starts at the end of January, and so we'll have more updates for you at that point. And Mark Labhart has just reminded me that next week, myself, Carl, and Mark Labhart with Representative Helm will be giving a presentation to the House Natural Resources Committee during the legislature's working days. So that's December 17th at 1 p.m. And we can send you all information to join that. And that's a quick briefing for the House Natural Resources Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction for the Conservation and Recreation Fund. Is there anything else on that subject? Questions or other news people have?
Okay, I think we have, that kind of wraps up our business except for the public comments.
Right, so there were 2 comments that were just placed in the chat from Jason from Harney County and Saristi from Defenders of Wildlife, so the committee can read those in the chat. I did not get a request for anybody else to make comments, but we'll do one last check. Are there any members of the public that want to make any comments?
I'm going to read those comments from Harney County. Harney County was the project, I think it ranked 7th or 8th, maybe. It was up there. It was in the top 10. Harney County Soil and Water Conservation District wants to thank the committee for your work, and we look forward to working with you as needed. So that's good support for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's actually ranked number 5, Carl.
Number 5. Okay, they're the next one up. So that's good. They're willing to work with us. So we're moving on. Sristi Kamal from Defenders of Wildlife thanks us for focusing on the equity and access issues through the subcommittee, and she intends to support our effort in any way she can. And she already has. There's some specific things she's involved with right now, and we really appreciate her efforts there. If there are no public comments, I have one last comment I'd like to make. As I said, the whole COVID thing is coming home to me more just because Klamath County has been isolated in all this. But it's there and it's stressful. And this has been a big change in my life and how I live and what I do. And I want to say that my experience with this committee has been so incredible. I really appreciate everything you all have done to get us to where we are. And I just wanted you to know how much it means to me. Thank you all.
Thank you, Carl.
And I have one last piece of business that goes along with Carl's comments on how great this process has been since March. And that's that our contract with Sherilyn is running out of hours right now, pretty much. And she's, I think, really saved us in this COVID world at a bare minimum by running the Ring Central platform for us. But we all know there's so much more there, and how she's managed to help us get through all of this so quickly. I think we're moving incredibly fast for a state program, and she's just been instrumental to that. So I want to say thank you, Sherilyn. We have a little gift for you that should come in the mail. And if there's anything anybody else wanted to say about that.
So sweet. Well, I'm going to miss you all. I have to say that. I think you guys are a great committee, and you know, it's been ironic to start working with you, like Carl said, during this COVID time. So you've been part of my extended friend group over the last 8 months, however long it's been now. We're all starting to lose track of the time, but I'm going to miss you all. You're doing good work.
I want to say that we have been successful. All the success that we've had in this committee would not have been possible without Sherilyn. You guys see her in the meeting and you know how helpful she is, but let me tell you, the behind the scenes stuff that she has done is unbelievable. Our scoring process, that alone has if that was all she did, it would have been way more than worth than what she's been paid to help us. And plus all the other insights that she brings, that again, I attribute our success to her, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, Sherilyn, I just chime in. You're awesome. You know, you can read the audience, you can read screen, you can modify spreadsheets, you can do it all at once, and you do it with a lot of warmth, grace, and humility. So thank you for all your great work here.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for another great meeting. We'll meet again in February. I may be in contact with you before then. Once again, thank you all. This was just great.
Yeah. Hey, happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Talk to you later.